Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. I'm your co-host for today, Mike Bailey, along with Ellen DePlacido. Ellen, are you with us?
I am. Good morning, Mike.
Yes, good morning. How are you today?
Good.
Okay, good. Yes.
Loving the weather.
Yeah, I always have to ask Ellen whether she's with us, okay, because we are not together. We are still separated because of COVID, and we're doing this, via telephone link up. So it seems to be working fine. We're getting used to it. Okay. Today is already program number 7, for our current growing season. In the last couple of times, we have presented some, ideas about planning for the garden and some of the physical structure, et cetera, and stuff like that. But this time around, we want to take a look at, some different approaches to gardening. And when I talk about different approaches, to gardening, people think of gardening in different manners. Some kind of people think of a standard in-ground growing process, which is fine, and which is what we did for years and years and years. Then there's also a mounded row within that standard approach that you can do. Then there's also raised beds, and then there's the container growing. But since Ellen is the farmer's daughter, Ellen's going to start off.
And
granddaughter. Ellen's going to start off talking about the standard in-ground growing. So what's that kind of look like, Ellen?
Well, I really want to say what it really looks like is a very large area, probably. Like if you have the space to actually, in a way, plow up and cultivate a large area, you could have your standard traditional garden where you have rows and you can walk through those, between those rows, and not step on your plants. And a lot of people like this idea because it really doesn't take a lot to start a traditional garden. You don't have to build anything. However, I did mention that it could cost a little bit more depending on what equipment and how large you make it. You might end up having to buy a rototiller or maybe even a small tractor, depending on how large you make this. So you want to be careful, but really, if you just kind of do it in an average size, it doesn't take a lot of money to start it. But it does require more space. And if you have more space, you've got more to take care of. So it could be a lot of work getting it started and maintaining it. So you want to think about how much time you want to spend in that garden, because there could be high maintenance there. There's more problems maybe keeping out your pests, like your rabbits and your groundhogs and your deer and all of that. And if it's a very dry season, I never saw my father or my grandfather water the garden, but in these days, if it gets dry, we seem to need to water the garden, and so of course that's going to take more time and effort. And it's just a larger area, more crops, more work to it. But in the end, you get a great harvest most of the time.
Yeah, you can have a wonderful garden using that particular approach. Mm-hmm. And as I was sitting here listening to your comments, Ellen, a standard approach doesn't have to be large. You can dig up a 4-by-4 square if you wanted to.
Sure.
You could do it with a shovel.
Right.
Or have your kids do it with the shovel. Stuff like that. So
and that's kind of, but that's kind of the way I would suggest starting out. Especially if you're a new gardener, you can do a traditional. They're great. I love them. Just don't start too big.
You're right. Just don't start too big. Now, the other one that we wanted to talk about in regards to standard gardening is that you can actually develop mounded rows within that standard garden, can't you?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Where you take that area that you've dug up or tilled up or plowed up, and you actually pull the soil up into mounded areas in rows. Maybe those raised areas within that garden are going to be maybe 20, 24 inches wide, as wide as you'd like to make them, and get it up about 5 or 6 inches above the surrounding soil. And that has some nice advantages to it. It really kind of allows you to plant a little bit more intensively and get higher productivity per square foot. It gives you easy access, to your plants, because between these mounded areas, you have some kind of a standard pathway, if you will, between these mounded
Right.
areas. Because typically you would make the mounded areas nice and long for the length of the garden, or you could do it the width of the garden. Doesn't make any difference. And you also get better drainage, okay, in these mounded areas. If you have a tendency to get wet in your particular area, if you mound up the soil a little bit like that, you won't have as much trouble with drainage problems if that is an issue for yourself. But going back to this intensive gardening approach, probably need to explain a little bit about what we mean about that. Okay, and I have a couple packets of seeds in front of me. In fact, maybe you hear the seeds rattling around in the packages, and carrots in particular. Let me look at this one. Okay, it talks about spacing, 15-inch times 3-inch. Okay, now that's probably a 15, a row that's separated by another row by 15 inches, and each individual carrot is separated by about 3 inches. But in intensive gardening, we don't use that particular approach, do we, Alan?
No. Mm-mm. No, we don't.
I mean,
I forget what do we call. I forget.
Well, we'll take those carrots in those beets and other things, and really kind of put them in rows that are within that mound, that are probably not more than 2 inches apart, and we'll seed those things, and the seeds will be separated by an inch or so, etc. And you get enough nutrients and you get enough moisture in that particular area to get good, healthy plants. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this one in our next program when we get into raised beds, because this intensive gardening, close planting, can be very, very productive and save you a lot of time and effort. But Ellen, it looks like we're ran out of time for today, so I think we'll follow up on this during the next session. So thank you for listening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.